Hello, my name is Matt and I'm the Youth and Children's Worker at Fetteresso Church in Stonehaven. The passage I'm bringing today is from Luke chapter 20 and verses 9 to 19. It follows immediately on from the end of chapter 19 where Jesus clears out the temple courts, driving out the traders and moneylenders. And then at the start of chapter 20, the Jewish leaders come to him and question him about his authority. Presumably, their noses are a bit out of joint from what he'd done, from the fact that he'd just challenged the status quo and taught some pretty revolutionary things too, all of which threatened their power and their roles in society. In response, Jesus asked them a question that they're not willing to answer. So he refuses to answer their question about his authority, but he does go straight on to tell this parable, reading from verse 9. A man planted a vineyard, rented it to some farmers, and went away for a long time. At harvest time, he sent a servant to the tenants so they would give him some of the fruit of the vineyard. But the tenants beat him and sent him away empty-handed. He sent another servant, but that one also they beat and treated shamefully and sent away empty-handed. He sent still a third, and they wounded him and threw him out. Then the owner of the vineyard said, "What shall I do? I'll send my son, whom I love. Perhaps they'll respect him." But when the tenants saw him, they talked the matter over. "This is the heir," they said. "Let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours." So they threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. What then will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He will come and kill those tenants and give the vineyard to others. When the people heard this, they said, "God forbid." Jesus looked directly at them and asked, "Then what is the meaning of that which is written? The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces. Anyone on whom it falls will be crushed." The teachers of the law and the chief priests looked for a way to arrest him immediately because they knew he had spoken this parable against them, but they were afraid of the people. This parable is pretty clear to us these days, certainly with the hindsight of the final few chapters of Luke and the rest of the Bible. And judging from their response in verse 19, it was pretty clear to the teachers of the law and the chief priests too. Jesus was telling this parable as a very clear warning against them specifically, and they looked for a way to arrest him and shut him up. God is the man who owns the vineyard, and the tenant farmers represent them, the teachers and chief priests. So the man entrusts something valuable to these farmers who should be capable and trustworthy enough to look after it, tend it, and yet still know who owns it. But in the parable, these tenant farmers get greedy, too big for their boots, and they refuse to offer some of the fruit of the vineyard back to the man who owns it. They keep it all for themselves. After the man has sent 3 servants who all return beaten and empty-handed, the man chooses to send his only beloved son. This is obviously Jesus in the parable, and what happens to the son? The tenant farmers see their chance to take it all for themselves, and they kill the son. Jesus' conclusion to the parable is that the only logical thing for the owner to do at this point is to get rid of these unworthy tenants and lease the vineyard to others. And there are lots of things we can draw from this parable, more than we have time for in a short reflection. But one thing that I think it really highlights is that Jesus knows their plan. Jesus is well aware at this point that they plan to kill him. It's no surprise to us, I guess. We've maybe heard the story of Easter enough times to know this by now. But I want to really think about that and all that it means. Jesus knew of their plan to kill him, and not in a sense of, well, I guess they don't like me, but there's not much I can do about it. Let's hope they don't manage it. No, Jesus knew that it was their plan. He knew that it was going to happen. And yet he still made all those same choices to go ahead with things, because this wasn't actually the plan of those who opposed him. It was really the plan of the one who sent him. And even though Jesus knew what was coming, knew what it would entail, he still chose to go through with it. We'll hear more details of that later in the week, I'm sure. But I'd encourage you for today, and as we hear all about it later in the week, remember that Jesus willingly chose to go through this for you and I, because he loves us.